सत श्री अकाल, स्वागत है तुहाडे सारिਆਂ ਦਾ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਖਾਸ ਪੇਸ਼ਕਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਜਸਲੀਨ ਕੌਰ। ਸ੍ਰੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਦੇ 550ਵੇਂ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ ਪੁਰਬ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰੇਟ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੀ ਪਾਮਾ ਗੈਲਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਖਾਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਲਗਾਈ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਲਾਲੀ ਮਾਰਵਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤਿਆਰ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਤਿਹਾਸਿਕ ਯਾਦਗਾਰਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਅਸਲ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ ਹਨ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਦੀ ਵਿਸ਼ਾਲ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਅਤੇ ਵਿਰਾਸਤ ਦੀ उत्ते चालना पाउंदियां हन। ते इस संबंधी खास गलबात लई साडे नाल अज मौजूद हन लाली मारवा। सत श्री अकाल जी, बहुत बहुत स्वागत है तुहाडा। लाली मारवा जी, असीं देखिआ कि श्री गुरु नानक देव जी का 550वां प्रकाश पुरब बड़ी शरधा भावना दे नाल दुनिया भर दे विच सैलीब्रेट किया गया है। तुहाडे वल्लों भी एक इनिशिएटिव लिया गया है कि तुसीं भी पामा गैलरी दे नाल मिल के एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत प्रदर्शनी लगाई है। तो सानू थोड़ा जिहा दसोगे कि ये जिहड़ी एग्जीबिशन हैगी है किस बारे है?
Well, I apologize. I'm going to respond in English, okay, if that's acceptable.
जी.
This really is intended to commemorate the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, as you've observed. And we've done it by essentially trying to trace his life and his legacy through paintings, manuscripts, photographs that are easily accessible to the average person. So this is, in a sense, both an art exhibition and a historical exhibition. It traces the life of Guru Nanak through the images. Most of the images are actually at least several hundred years old. They're drawn from Janam Sakhis. They're drawn from in some cases, standalone paintings, but in most cases, they're actually drawn from manuscripts and Janam Sakhis. And we're privileged to have in Canada, in Toronto in particular, a large number of very rare manuscripts, which the various owners have been very generous in allowing us to borrow for purposes of this exhibition. So the manuscripts and the paintings that we have essentially trace the life of Guru Nanak through his early years, which is some of the paintings we see here. They go on to trace his travels, his great journeys, Udasis, and there were many of those journeys, and they're all basically recorded here. And eventually, his return to Punjab, his decision to settle in Kartarpur, and to pass the Guruship on to Guru Angad. Okay. And then, as a completion, as a continuation of Guru Nanak's legacy, we really have to include essentially the true form, the full form of the legacy, which was included the Gurus that followed, culminating with from Guru Angad, culminating with Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji, at the end of his life, proclaimed the Guru Granth Sahib as the eternal Guru. So that too is part of our scope of the exhibition.
जी, इस एग्जीबिशन का असीं टूर भी जरूर लांगे, बट उस तो पहला असीं जानना चाहांगे कि किस तरह और कितना टाइम लग गया तुहानूं ये सब इकट्ठा करन दे विच, ये सारा कलैक्ट करन दे विच?
कलैक्शन तो काफ़ी बड़ी पुरानी है, okay? But exhibition, the decision to stage this exhibition was taken about 6 months earlier. So it has taken about 6 months to gather the material, and most importantly to do the research to make sure that the information we provided is absolutely scholarly and correct. And we were very privileged to have a large amount of material available to us. It's a good opportunity to thank the scholars, okay, most of whom are not with us any longer, who have basically, through their books and their writings, have communicated this information to us over the centuries.
जी, सिख कम्यूनिटी ਲਈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡੀ ਅਚੀਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, आई थिंक ਉਹ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸ਼ੋਕੇਸ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਵੀ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਲਗਾਈ ਜਾਏਗੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਜਾਂ ਐਲਬਰਟਾ ਸਾਈਡ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਹੋਰ ਕਿਤੇ ਵੀ ਲਗਾਈ ਜਾਏਗੀ?
Well, that's a question which is still on the table. Okay, we would like to see this exhibition travel. We are in discussion with possible venues and institutions who may be interested in seeing this, but no decision on that has been taken as yet. But certainly, the people who have contributed to this exhibition are very willing and keen to see it travel to other Sikh communities across the country.
जी, अपने दर्शकों ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਦੀ अर्ਲੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਤੋਂ, और फिर ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਰਨੀ ਜਰਨੀ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਕਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਤੱਕ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੂਰੀ ਡਿਟੇਲ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਲਾਲੀ ਮਰਮਾ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਟੂਰ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ, I'd love to. Thank you. We'll begin with examples of images of Guru Nanak's early life. I'll start with the one of him as a young boy in this village of Talwandi. Okay? And then the other painting that we have here illustrates some famous Janam Sakhis, okay, as famous stories from the Janam Sakhis. This one deals with the time when he was lost in meditation and his cows went and ate the neighboring farmer's field, and how when the farmer complained to the local governor, and they who sent people to examine the damage. They found that the field had not, in fact, been damaged. Somehow it had been replenished. Okay? And so this is an episode, a painting that illustrates that. This one is slightly later, when shortly after he moved to join his sister in Sultanpur. Okay? And he would go for a swim in the morning, a bathe in the morning, every morning in the river nearby. And this illustrates the time when he disappeared for 3 days. It's an absolutely momentous time, okay, a landmark in his life, because he disappeared for 3 days and then he returns and he remains catatonic for 1 full day. Yeah. He says nothing. And then his first words when he regains his speech is to say, "Koi Hindu nahi, koi Musliman nahi." And that began essentially is actually the opening words of his journey through life eventually. This section then moves into the journeys of Guru Nanak. Okay? And these were not just casual travels; these were pilgrimages in search of ideas, meaning, you know. And also it was an opportunity for him to give expression to his own ideas. Okay?
ਸੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਮੈਪ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਰੇ ਰੰਗ ਦੇ ਅੱਖਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲਿਖੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ ਹਨ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ।
This refers to his famous episode in Hardwar, where he basically proceeded to take the water from the river and toss it over his shoulder. And when he was questioned about that, he said he was watering his fields in Punjab. And when the absurdity of that was pointed out, he said, "Well, my fields are a lot closer than the heavens that you're throwing water towards." Okay? So in a way, it was a very gentle way of actually drawing attention to the futility of rituals. These then lead us into images of various sites and gurdwaras that are now in Pakistan. A colleague of ours, okay, Amardeep Singh from Singapore, made a journey across Pakistan and Afghanistan, and he's done some great work in photographing the sites of historic importance to the Sikhs.
And these are all the real pictures?
These are real pictures that were taken in the last 10 years. Okay? And this one is of Nankana Sahib. Okay? And the lady there is the lady who actually was the first person to reopen Nankana Sahib after partition. Because the whole area had been completely cleared of all Sikhs, and so the site remained empty until this lady took it upon herself to restart the Gurdwara. Okay? This gentleman greeted the photographer, a Sikh, young Sikh, as he said, "Sat Sri Akal Sahib, bari dinon baad tushe aaye ho." And then they added Baba Nanak came here. Okay, so that memory of Guru Nanak is still alive. Okay, in those places that he visited. Okay.
ਸੋ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਹੈ अर्ਲੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਅਤੇ ਜਰਨੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਵੀ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਜਾਰੀ ਰਹੇਗਾ। ਜਲਦ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਬਣੇ ਰਹੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੀ ਪਾਮਾ ਗੈਲਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਦੇ 550ਵੇਂ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ ਪੁਰਬ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰੇਟ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਇੱਕ ਖਾਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਲਗਾਈ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਲੀਗ੍ਰਾਫੀ, ਡਰਾਇੰਗਸ, ਫੋਟੋਗ੍ਰਾਫਸ, ਫੈਬਰਿਕਸ, ਮੈਨੂਸਕ੍ਰਿਪਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਲਗਾਈਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਹਨ ਔਰ ਇਹ ਪੂਰੀ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਲਾਲੀ ਮਾਰਵਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤਿਆਰ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਦੀ अर्ਲੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਬਾਰੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਰਨੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਉਦਾਸੀਆਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉਸ ਕਾਰਨਰ ਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ ਲਗਾਈਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਹਨ ਦ ਰਿਟਰਨ ਟੂ ਪੰਜਾਬ, ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਏ। ਤੇ ਉਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਜਾਣਨਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮੈਨੂਸਕ੍ਰਿਪਟਸ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਲਗਾਈਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਕੀ ਡਿਟੇਲ ਦੱਸਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ।
ਅੱਛਾ ਜੀ। Well, the last of the images of the journey would be this one here, which shows him returning to Talwandi. Okay? And eventually, after his subsequent travels, he returns to Kartarpur. Okay? And this talks to the fact of his final return to Punjab and his final settlement in Kartarpur. Okay? This begins essentially the story of his successors, where this picture illustrates one of his followers, Nanak, who was a devoted follower of Guru Nanak, and in this painting he's carrying a pile of what is like rubbish, wet rubbish on his head, and he doesn't care that his clothes are getting soiled and his face is soiled. And he was extremely devoted to the Guru, and of course and also very enlightened person, as we'll soon discover when he essentially assumed the Guruship. Guru Nanak, before he passed away, passed on the Guruship to Angad, and he renamed him. For his name was originally Lena, and he was renamed Angad, of my own spirit, of my own flesh. Okay? And so the Guru Angad then basically continues to then nurture and look after the growing Sikh community as Nanak the second. Okay? So what we see here is a succession of gurus that followed. Okay? And each one of the gurus, and this painting captures essentially the full picture of the succession. Each of the images it represents a guru who then added something new, something different, something original to the legacy. The first contribution that we have to acknowledge is Guru Angad's in gathering Guru Nanak's manuscripts, his pothis, and just collecting them for posterity. And he also refined the language of Punjabi as we know it, Gurmukhi as we know it today, and refined it to the point where it could be actually an adequate vehicle for those early writings. And so this sums up essentially the contributions of each of the gurus, the creation of the Khalsa, okay? And which is shown on this picture here. Okay? If you take a close look, it's difficult to see this picture clearly, but you see a depiction of Guru Gobind Singh, his congregation, and the Panch Pyare, the first five, okay, Khalsa. Okay? And his other lasting legacy was that upon his death, he proclaimed essentially the Guru Granth Sahib as the future eternal Guru. Thereafter, things would not change. Okay?
I was reading that ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਵੀ 1960 ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਸਭ collect ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ. So how you got inspired?
I think the same way anyone else does. Okay? I grew up, I was born in Amritsar, okay, But one of the casualties of partition was that our family had to move to eventually to Bengal. But I retained, as everybody else in our family, a very strong tie to Punjab and to our heritage. And so it seemed like a natural development that when an occasion arose and I had an opportunity to acquire material, I would do so within whatever means I had at the time. And it's also part of a larger interest in art in itself. Okay, so it's a bit of both. Okay.
जी ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਪਾਮਾ ਗੈਲਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਉਹ 17 ਦਸੰਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਓਪਨਿੰਗ ਡੇ ਸੀਗਾ ਔਰ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ 19 ਜਨਵਰੀ ਤੱਕ ਲੱਗੇਗੀ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਪੀਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਉਣ। ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਖੂਬਸੂਰਤ ਢੰਗ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਸਿੱਖ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਇਸ ਪੂਰੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਰੂਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਰਸਾਈ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਵੱਡੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕੀ ਆ ਕੇ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣਗੇ। ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਸੈਸ਼ਨਸ ਵੀ ਰੱਖੇ ਗਏ ਹਨ ਇਸ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ?
Well, there are two lectures that are planned. Okay. One is by Devinder Toor. He's a very famous and very generous collector in Britain. And he's coming here on his own to give a talk on, I think, on January the 12th. I'll be giving a talk about the images that we gathered here and what to read, how to interpret them on the closing day of January the 19th. So I encourage people to come to both. If there's interest in schools for a guided tour, again, I make an open offer. I'll be glad to basically take them around to the extent that I can.
ਜਨਮ ਸਾਖੀ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ, ਕਿੰਨੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਜਨਮ ਸਾਖੀਆਂ?
Well, the early Janam Sakhis are the only information, mainly, okay, the only information that we have about the Sikh Gurus. In fact, it's quite remarkable that there's very little contemporary information available during the life of Guru Nanak, apart from his references to having witnessed the attack of Saidpur, now it's called Aminabad. Okay? We don't have too much information on him other than from the Janam Sakhis. So essentially, these Janam Sakhis were written by his followers, by people who were very sort of moved by Guru Nanak's life. And so they eventually wrote documents, and the earliest of such documents that we are aware of is held at the British Museum. Okay? That's called the B40 manuscript, and I will draw your attention to it later. And then we've been fortunate in finding sort of Janam Sakhis of similar vintage, okay, in private collections. And some of those are exhibited here, and I'll be glad to sort of point them out to you as we go along. What we have here are some very rare documents, handwritten documents, dating back to the early parts of the 18th century, okay, and the 19th century as well. I'm sorry. This one in particular, okay, is actually a collection of various hymns and poems, but it also includes Janam Sakhi of Guru Nanak. Okay? So, and on the other side here we have similar documents. These are essentially just gatherings, pothis, that were put together of various passages from the Granth Sahib or some other poems and the poetry of that period. Okay? We have a photocopy of a published document rather on the B40 manuscript, which is the rarest such manuscript that we have in the Sikh world, and that is held currently in Britain, okay, by essentially a wing of the British Museum, the India Office Library. Okay. This manuscript here is actually a wonderful copy of the Ramayana. Okay. And what I found really interesting about this copy is that the preface is in the opening page is a painting of Guru Nanak Pala Mardana. Okay, as it's in a sense an act of homage or an act of affection. They refer to in various texts as Baba Nanak in a very affectionate way. And what's intriguing about this particular painting is that it shows Guru Nanak, Bala Mardana, and alongside there are two young Hindus, okay? And it speaks to the great affection and affinity that existed between the communities at the time. Okay? Likewise, the print that we saw earlier, the photograph, of the various sites in Pakistan, where the people there still remember with affection the memory of Guru Nanak's passage through Pakistan. Okay? So, so it speaks to the universality of the message of Guru Nanak, and the degree to which it was generally accepted, okay, and was part of the national kind of identity at the time. Okay. So this, what we have here, is a Rumala, and in the Rumala is an embroidered portrait of the conclave of the Sikh Gurus. Okay. And the first thing that will strike you is that if you examine the images of the pictures, they all look faintly Chinese. Okay. And so that is at first puzzling, but then you realize why this is so. The Rumala was commissioned by the Sikh troops serving in China.
In China.
So they got local craftsmen to depict this image of the 10 gurus, and they told them basically what to do, okay, what figures to include. So it includes, you know, Mardana, it includes Bala, okay, with the Chauri, you know, it has Guru Gobind Singh with his hunting hawk, you know, and so on. And of course, what's really charming is the fact that all the figures look Chinese, and that's normal because to the craftsmen who put this together, to them, human beings look like that. And so I found this a really wonderful feature, okay, of this Rumala. Okay. This is a wonderful painting of the conclave, but what was interesting about this painting is that it includes, okay, the 11th Guru, the Granth Sahib. Okay, so in the center, in addition to the Kara Prasad, they've actually got, so in a sense it's more of a complete painting of not the 10 living Gurus, but the 10th plus the Granth Sahib. Okay.
लाली वर्मा जी जी एग्जीबिशन तैयार की गई है पामा गैलरी दे विच वक-वक पेंटिंग्स राहीं, फैब्रिक्स राहीं, ड्राइंग्स राहीं, कैलीग्राफी राहीं एक पेंटिंग बहुत ही डिटेल दे विच उन्हां दी गुरु जी दी गुरु नानक देव जी दी जीवनी दे बारे दसदी है एंड आई एम प्रीटी श्योर ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਲੋਕੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਅੱਗੋਂ ਆਣਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਪਸੰਦ ਆਏਗੀ ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੋਗੇ
Well, the only message I have for you and for the viewers is first to thank you for your interest and encourage that interest. I encourage you to come and see the exhibition, see for yourself, and bring your families and your children to this exhibition, because ultimately this exhibition is really just for you. So please come and enjoy it, and if you have any questions, we'd be glad to help you.
थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस बहुत वधिया लग्या तुहाडे नाल गलबात करके और असीं अपने दर्शकों को दसना चाहांगे कि इस एग्जीबिशन की थीम रखी गई है द साखीज ऑफ गुरु नानक द लाइफ एंड लेगेसी ऑफ द फाउंडर ऑफ द सिख फेथ असीं उम्मीद करांगे कि तुसीं सारे अपने परिवार दे नाल एक बार ये एग्जीबिशन जरूर वेखण आओगे ब्रैम्पटन की पामा गैलरी दे विच एग्जीबिशन 19 जनवरी 2020 तक लगाई जा रही है ऐसी साड़ी अज की खास मुलाकात लाली मरवाल जी नाल जिन्हां वालों यह पूरी एग्जीबिशन तैयार की गई है उम्मीद करते हैं तुहानूं पसंद आई होगी जे तुसीं अपना कोई विचार साझा करना चाहते हो तो जरूर लिख के भेजो feedback@ptcnetwork.com ते अगले हफ्ते असीं मुड़ तो हाजिर होवांगे नवे मुद्दे अते नवे मेहमान दे नाल उदों तक दिओ इजाजत धन्नवाद।